All right, and we are live. Welcome everybody to Lubbock Compact Live for Wednesday, October the 27th. And we got some big things going on at the moment in one of our historical neighborhoods, the historical Heart of Lubbock neighborhood. And we have a special guest today with us here. This is Leah. She is a parent at Dupre Elementary School, which is being proposed to be closed down by LISD. And as most folks who have followed Lubbock Compact know, this is actually one of the 5 pillars of our organization. And one of the main reasons why our organization was started was to save neighborhood schools. Because again, as most of you know, we are very focused on revitalization of our historic areas of Lubbock. And we can't, really revitalize an area if there's no schools there for folks to send their kids to and to grow around. And so this is a very important issue for us. We noticed that the community started to organize really quickly. And Leah, you were a driving force behind that. So I guess we can, who created the Facebook page for the Save Dupre?
That was me.
Awesome.
I knew I needed a way to organize our efforts and to get the word out. And a lot of the parents are on Facebook. And so that's where I started.
Awesome. Yeah. So just to give everybody a little background of what's going on here. So last year, the parents and teachers at Dupre were told in a meeting that Dupre would be signing up for an initiative that's done by the Texas Education Agency called System of Great Schools. And this is an initiative that helps schools get funding and resources to face any challenges or to deal with any challenges that they may be facing. And so this was just last year. These programs, this is a 4-year program. So that's kind of, I guess, where any sort of notification came from to the parents and teachers that there were things that needed to be addressed. And so then you fast forward to this year, unfortunately, we found out that there was 2 groups of students that were actually removed from Dupre Elementary. And so the rules here in Lubbock are that a school has to have 200 kids enrolled in order to be able to remain open. And that there's a lot of technicalities there, but it basically has to do with money and funding. And so if a school dips below 200, then the district then considers if it's going to close the school. So the school right now currently sits at 196 on their enrollment, which is just 4 below the 200. So just again, to kind of reiterate here, 2 groups of students were taken out just this year. So one of those was the special ed program at Dupre, which was about 20 students, I'm told, as well as another group of somewhere between 20 and 30 students. And so when these kids were sent off to another school, that's how Dupre ended up dipping below. And so as you can see, there is a lot of confusion around this, because why would you tell parents and staff that we're going to be part of the system of great schools? We're going to have this few years to turn things around that we need to turn around. And then you remove students to the point to where it now dips below the threshold. It's very concerning in that instance. The other concerning thing about this is that when neighborhoods lose schools, it never ends up well for those neighborhoods. And it's even worse for neighborhoods where you have a high rate of people that are on the lower end of the economic spectrum. And so because a lot of folks in those situations, a lot of times they have to walk to school or have their kids walk to school. They have things that are very specifically set up in their life to make it work, right? So where they can go to work, they can get the kids to school and all of that good stuff. And so when you make them go to another school that's possibly 3 miles away, another one that's a little closer, but it's across a major highway with no crosswalks, you're going to force people basically to rearrange their entire lives. And this can cause just so many different issues. It depends on the family. Some will be fine, but many will not. And then you have to deal with the fallout from that, both with the students who are being made to leave their home school, as well as the schools that are receiving these students. And so there's issues on all sides. And so that's my spiel on it. I'll let Dr. Nick chime in here.
For me, where I want to start is just a conversation with Leah. As a parent coming into these conversations, something that's really impressed me is the eloquence of the parents and how y'all have been speaking up, how organized y'all have been able to become. And I'm curious, where does that energy, where does that motivation come from for you?
Well, for me, it's my kids. This school is important to my children. It's my daughter is in the second grade there, and so she's been there since kindergarten. We bought a house in this neighborhood specifically for that school. We'd heard great things about the small environment of that school, and of course, we loved the historic building, and we love historic homes, and so it was a win-win for us. And we've been in this neighborhood since 2005 when we bought our home. And we were blessed with our children just a few years ago, and we're ready and excited to get them started. And when I told my daughter the news that her school might close, she cried in my car. She is grieving a school and her friends and the life she knows. And it's devastating to her, and it's devastating to the other 190 other 96
96. Yeah. Wow. And when you hear that 196, that it's just 4 students, that is a medium-sized Lubbock family, effectively.
Mm-hmm. One family would move in and we would have been over the threshold.
Right. How does that make you feel about the conversations that you've had so far with administration, the information that you've received from LISD on this issue?
Well, honestly, we haven't had much information from LISD. I found out from a news report on KLVK that the numbers in our neighborhood have been declining for 10 years. Well, I've been here for 10 years, nearly. Why haven't I noticed that the decline has been there? But no one ever stepped in from the school district to talk to our school or the parents at our school talking about low numbers. I found out about the special ed department being removed from our program and how that really impacted our numbers. We are a small school. We're never going to have 700 kids. That building would never have that. But we had enough kids. And I think that when you really look in and dive into some of the data, we were surviving at lower than average rates for per student in that small building, and we had a community built. And LISD came in and didn't talk to us about the decline, didn't talk to us about moving those children out of the school that would cause it to fall below expected numbers. And then there's the additional aspect of our entire neighborhood is not zoned for our school. There are 3 or 4 blocks at the south end of our neighborhood that aren't part of our catchment area. And that would easily, of course, get us over the 200, and then probably honestly get us closer to 230, 250. And so it makes me angry.
Yeah. So just to explain for folks out there, for what Leah is referring to here. So the Dupre school is situated between 19th and 34th. And then in between, is it Q and
University?
Q and University. So if you picture that area there, their catchment area stops at 30th Street. Mm-hmm. So there's 4 more blocks there that are on the north side of 34th that should really be in this school's catchment area. And so that's a whole nother thing here. And just so folks know how this kind of all went down from your perspective, mm-hmm. How did you find out about the meeting where this was announced, and how did that all play out where they announced this on the 19th?
Well, I did get an email saying that there was a parent, a parent information meeting. I assumed, honestly, it was part of this Better Schools program, because I had just gone on Wednesday, the Wednesday prior, to a Title I meeting that where we discussed things that we were planning on doing. And so they sent us an email on the Friday after. I was at the school on Wednesday, talking to the vice principal, talking to other students and teachers, or other teachers and parents. And so I got the email and I'm like, oh, it must be for something like that. I can't make that meeting because I'm super involved. I couldn't make that meeting because I already had a work event scheduled. It's not like they gave me a huge amount of notice. And then I got a flyer in my daughter's backpack the day before. So if I hadn't checked my email, I would have not known until the day before that there was a meeting and they wanted us to come. And so there was no sense of urgency. There was no sense of importance or just no real information about what we were going to be discussing. And then when I couldn't make the meeting, and then the next day I get a call from my boss saying, hey, isn't Dupre where your daughter goes? I'm like, yes, why? She goes, well, it was just on the news. They're closing your school.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
I didn't even hear it from anyone official. I heard it on the news because my boss texted me about it. And I was startled by the news when she told me, and my daughter asked me what happened. And I told her that it was on the news that her school might be closing. And that's when she cried. And she was like, oh no, what am I going to do? How am I going to learn? Where am I going to do? And, everything a 7-year-old shouldn't have to worry about. And then I had to deal with and I'm dealing with hurt and bewilderment, and I have no buffer because I was not kept in the loop and I wasn't able to deal with this or get this information from LISD. I had to hear about it on the news. It was just devastating. And part of the Better Schools program was that we were supposed to have 1 year of development and then 3 years of implementation of the plan. So I sat on a Zoom call meeting right where I'm sitting right now. I'm sorry, my cat's in the background as a distraction. I sat right where I am now with Kathy Rollo on a Zoom call where she told me we had 4 more years to figure things out.
Wow. And this, in our experience, there's so many reflections on the conversations that LISD had about Dunbar. And when Dunbar was a 5-year underperforming school in the state of Texas mandated that LISD had to do something, their outreach to the neighborhood was confusing. It was difficult to understand, and it was late at best. And then even farther back, when we think about the East Lubbock neighborhood's experiences with school closures, what you're describing is so similar to the ways in which that this has happened in the past. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I will compliment you and the parents of Dupre in doing is that those parents felt the same way that you did, but they didn't have the time, the ability to be able to organize, to get the word out, to talk about how damaging this can be for the neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. And so, this policy of school consolidation, we have many, many years now of data on the impact that it has on neighborhoods. And we have it in the census data, we have it in property tax data. And what we know is that it very much so is a self-defeating strategy. When you take a neighborhood school from our communities, they're the cultural anchor. They are the community anchor. They are what brings everyone together. When they go, what you see is a decline in families living in the neighborhood, which translates ultimately into decline in enrollment at LISD schools in general. You see a decline in property tax values, which results essentially in a decline in revenue for LISD as well. And so at the end of the day, we don't come out net positive when you look at the long-term implications of these school closures. And at the same time, hearing how passionate you are and how passionate the Dupre parents are about this, it's so clear that I think if there had been better organizing, if there had been a way for parents in the past to have gotten the word out about these issues, I don't think we would have had all the school closures that we've had up until this point.
Yeah, and there's one thing about this whole thing, there was a couple of things that happened at the Heart of Lubbock Neighborhood Association meeting that we were all at on Monday, where we were letting folks know about this. There was number one, there was a question that I got asked that's kind of relevant here to what we're talking about. And the answer I had, wish I had a different answer, but I had to give the answer I gave. And the question that the lady had was, what can we learn from these past closings, about the communities organizing, what worked, what didn't work? And I told her, unfortunately, the only lessons that we can glean from those past closings is that they've happened, that this has been a trend, and that they get done really quickly with very little communication, very little transparency. And those, unfortunately, communities in East and North Lubbock were, like Nick just said, caught completely unawares. There was no time given to organize about that. So that was number one. The other thing that comes to my mind here, Leah, is something that you said, and this is something that we have heard with, going through processes with city council and city boards a lot. And so it just sounded really familiar, and it struck me when you said it. And I thought that it would be important to bring up here on the show. I know y'all went out and were passing out flyers trying to let people know about this. And you said, that the feedback you were getting from folks, the gist of it was basically like, well, they don't care what we have to say. So why put energy into this?
Wow.
Because it's just going to turn out not going our way. And unfortunately, that's the feeling that people have with their school district.
Right. Their school district.
Right. And how can you talk about your feelings concerning that?
I talked to several parents that had either been through a school closure already, and this is their second school closure to go through in their family, or third, and possibly some generationally. There were some people at that meeting that talked about how they are still feeling the effects of schools that closed in the 60s for their family, because the neighborhood changed and then they were forced out of their neighborhood, and then they moved to another neighborhood, and then that school gets closed and they move to another. But the thing that broke my heart was when they said that there's nothing we can do because they've made up their minds. And I've seen this before, and we fought before, and there's just no point, because they're going to do what they want to do because they've already figured it out. They haven't voted on it. And I feel like this is a time where we need to stand up and say enough with the conversations without your constituents involved.
Right.
Enough with making deals and plans without our input. We need input. These are our schools. These are our children. Who's supposed to know our children better than us? And the school system seems to not be listening over and over and over again to the parents. They're just worried about the dollar, and honestly, how much are they really going to save in this? And that's probably another branch of this conversation we'll get to. And I do have some data that I'm starting to develop that I can discuss with you about that as well.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I would tell folks, and I completely agree with you, and I'm from East Lubbock, and I've seen school closing after school closing. Both of my daughter's elementary schools closed. And so we've experienced this. We've seen this movie a bunch of different times. And I am still in fight mode, because we cannot, like Leah just said, enough is enough. We have to draw our line in the sand and say, we have to do something different.
Right.
And so that's first and foremost. So if anything, I would encourage folks to just do what you can. I know that it's very hard. I am in a very different position than most, so I am able to devote a lot of my time to doing community advocacy. But I know I've worked probably every job under the sun. I know that that's not everybody's situation, and I know how hard it can be. But if you can send an email, or or if you could just show up and just be at the meeting to sit in solidarity. These things really do help. But don't lose heart. That's number one. And number two, because the community was able to organize so quickly and started to make so much noise, and there was so much blowback from this, there actually is a meeting scheduled that was not supposed to be happening, which is coming up this coming Monday, the 1st, at 5:30 p.m. at Dupre. And so let me encourage everybody to go out there. Even if you're not from the Dupre neighborhood, come and sit in solidarity
I'll be there.
with this group, because, and I keep saying this and I'll keep saying it, it could very well be your school next.
Right.
You just heard Leah, and we all have experience with this, of school after school after school. Your school could be next. So don't ever put it past something that could happen. Leah, what are some things, what are you hoping to get out of this meeting with Dr. Rollo on Monday?
I want the closure for next year off the table. I want us to have 3 to 5 years to collaborate and work on a plan like we were told we were going to have. I want what was expected and promised to me and my children. I want a chance to make Dupre the best school that it can be as an elementary school. It is the heart of this neighborhood, and it deserves to continue to serve this neighborhood, which it's served for 95 years. It needs to have 95 more, and it's capable of having that. Now, it may only be capable of having 350 students, which is not enough apparently for LISD, but that's impacted lives every year, year after year. And there's so many people that think fondly of their time at Dupre that have been messaging me from when they went there in the 40s. It has made an impact on those lives and those families, and they're ready to stand up and fight with us because they recognize that this is an important part of the neighborhood. But I need this closure off the table because it wasn't transparently developed. This plan, this proposal was not transparently developed, and it was done in secret without notifying the parents or even the staff. I've heard that some of the staff members openly wept when they heard that the school was closing. Adults are upset, and some of the things that the LISD is saying is that if there's more kids in a school, they can offer more programs, or they can, the teachers won't be as stressed, and there's more teachers to collaborate with. If you have 5 and 6 teachers in a grade level, there's not really a good way to collaborate. When, as it is now, there's 2 teachers per grade level at Dupre, and they collaborate exceptionally. They work together on lesson plans so that all the children at every grade level are together. The whole concept of No Child Left Behind that was such a failure at large, it succeeds in this school because it is a small school. It is at a small scale, and these teachers are able to see the deficits of these children. And if a teacher's underperforming, it's a small school, it gets noticed. Unfortunately, if there's a stressed out or underperforming teacher at some of these larger schools, they can fly under the radar for years without being called out about it. There's so many things that I have, but the main thing is I need this off the table so we can have an actual conversation without this looming sense of panic. And then I feel like there aren't very many, I have oppositional answers for all of the things that they're proposing and saying. How many programs does an elementary school need? They just need focused attention at that level. And that's what they have.
And let's, I want to dwell on this for a moment because I think it's something that we should probably poke a hole in. This idea of educational opportunities, and that this conversation is about trying to provide better educational opportunities for students by consolidating the schools. And what I will say is, I haven't seen a quality improvement in test scores in East Lubbock as a result of school consolidations. In fact,
the opposite.
right. And in fact, some of those school closures were actually top performing schools. And at the time, there was huge dialogue around the fact that one of the school consolidations, it was believed to have occurred in an effort to dilute the failing test scores of one school with the top performing scores of another. And what ultimately ended up happening was first off, it ripped apart the neighborhood community dynamic with the schools, where the parents were engaged, the teachers were engaged. And so they lost that fabric, and test scores did not improve. They got worse because of the fact that community was no longer in school, that these students were now going outside of their neighborhoods, outside of their communities for educational opportunities. And maybe the diversity of extracurricular programs that they can offer on paper looks to be better. But in your experience, how do you feel about the education your children are receiving at Dupre?
I am so pleased with the things that I've seen. My degree is in family studies and human development and family studies. I am aware of the developmental places that my children need to be, and to be honest, I could not be happier. The teachers at the school are phenomenal. They have I think there's 9 people who had master's degrees on staff last year. And then, of course, everyone has a bachelor's degree, but they were experienced teachers. My daughter's current teacher has been a teacher for more than 20 years. She knows what she's doing. She's dedicated to the school. Unfortunately, she was one of the, when we spoke briefly, and she mentioned that she was at one of the schools that recently closed and was transferred. This is her first year at Dupre, and now they're closing her school too. So how heartbreaking is that, to be a teacher that just keeps going to the schools that need you, to have them close. But my daughter's kindergarten teacher, that's the teacher I want for my son. She was phenomenal. She could not have been more patient. And if anyone has tried to teach a 5-year-old to read, patience, you cannot have enough of it. But apparently she does. And but then that brings me to another point, that I've been so pleased in all the trauma and changes that have happened in the last several years with COVID. I was so pleased with the teachers that I got and the experience that I had in spite of COVID. But my daughter started kindergarten. Her first year of her basic education was interrupted. And they're already calling these children the lost generation because they've lost some of that foundational time in school. And then her second year, her first grade year, was when we were trying to all figure out what that's going to look like. Are we going to do online? Are we going to do instructional in classroom? People were out for weeks at a time for, COVID exposures, and it was drama. and then this is her first year as a regular school year, only to have 2 months in it derailed by a school closure threat. And then when she moves to her new school, I've seen studies about the schools in Chicago and Harlem and some of the bigger cities, that when they consolidate, the year after the consolidation, the scores are down as well.
Yes.
So that's going to be not only kindergarten, first, second, third grade, 4 years of my child's education is going to be less than it should be. This is not the right time for them to even consider closing another school.
Right.
It's just, to be honest, COVID derailed everything, and we need to get it back on track before you disrupt their lives again.
Yeah. And there's also, and I found this out from you, there's also a after school program right across the street at the Hope Shalom building there. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the church that is directly across the street from the school has an after school program for 40 to 50 kids, sometimes more, depending on volunteerism.
Wow.
And they provide free after school care from after school until 5:30 at night. So parents can get off work and come pick up their kiddos. They do not charge. There is no income requirements. They are
Wow.
just simply for the kids that go to Dupree. And they have after school activities, crafts. They play outside with them. They did a little musical program for us at the end of last year. It was pretty sweet. These kids have help with homework if needed while they're waiting. And the volunteers give them a safe and secure place to be after school instead of being at home alone, because a lot of these parents could not afford after school programming. Even if it were discounted, they wouldn't be able to fit that into the budget. And to have a free program that's across the street from the school, I mean, you cannot replace that. There are wonderful after school programs that are discounted in this town, and that's great. But these parents, a lot of them could not fit another dollar into their budget. And that's just the reality. And we're going to take that away from these children. This safe. My daughter goes there, and she has so much fun, and hates to leave them. And they are an amazing resource for our families. That church also has a clothing closet. So if the children or the families that are in need in that neighborhood need additional clothing, and I think they have some food vouchers and things like that too. So they are truly supporting that neighborhood, and it just can't be replicated.
Yeah, we just got a question from Honda on Facebook, and it says, question, how would childcare work? And I don't know if you've heard anything about this. I would assume you probably haven't, but it says, question, how would childcare work if moved to Brown Elementary, for instance? Will LISD bus the kids to Hope Shalom after? That's a question.
That is a question for Kathy Rollo on Monday. So, and that's definitely something that I'm sure with all the questions, I hope that gets asked, that we don't forget about that one, because we have so many questions. I don't want to let that is an important one. I don't know if they would be able to do that. I think that would be a really, if this could not be stopped, I think that would be a really gracious way to ease some of that transition. Whether LISD would do that or not, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and so I know that you've spent a lot of time researching this and compiling data and things of that nature. We can get into some of the negative effects later on if we have some time. But kind of where I want to go now is just so that we can illustrate to folks the different options that would be available. For instance, if they said, okay, we're going to move ahead with the system of great schools, we're going to give Dupree the 4 years. What are some things you found that could be brought into the school pretty much immediately that could help with, enrollment or other challenges at the school?
Well, one thing that I thought of that we could definitely get started for next year, I'm assuming it may take a year depending on government funding, you know how that goes. We don't have a pre-K3 program outside of the East Side. And since they took out our special education program, there is space available. And there could be a pre-K3 program in this neighborhood. As I said, I was a foster and then adoptive parent. And I know that any child that's been in the conservatorship of the state through CPS qualifies for pre-K automatically. They get letters that allow them in. So even if the foster family doesn't qualify on income, or the adoptive family doesn't qualify because they make too much money, they are still eligible for that program. It is also open to underserved populations, homeless, English as a second language. There's several other criteria, one of which, of course, is low income. And when 96% of our neighborhood, or the children that go to our school, are low income, I feel like they'd qualify. And so that's a way to get bodies in the chairs, kids in that school, and serve the neighborhood as it is. My child right now, my youngest, is 3, and he didn't have a pre-K 3 at his school. He would have qualified because he is adopted out of foster care. And so we would have loved to have gotten him in, but currently only Joe Y. Urban and Alderson have pre-K 3 programs, and you have to be in their catchment zone to qualify. And there's nothing outside of the east side where I could qualify. We could offer that pre-K 3 program for our neighborhood, Bean Elementary, which is across the street, which is another low income school, or even, they could draw the lines however they want for that pre-K program. And I think that's definitely a way to get more kids in there. We, as part of our Title I program, talked about having kind of like mentor groups or kind of like pod groups, like where when you start kindergarten with your kid, you kind of get like part of a mommy group or, a family group. So we could kind of support each other. We did that in my daughter's kindergarten class just anyway, like that's how it worked for us. And if you're not one of those sociable people, maybe we could help you along a little, because that sense of community, that being able to pick a kid up and take them to their home, because we all live in the same neighborhood.
Right.
If you're stuck at work, we could meet you at the house. There's been several times that one of my daughter's friends, mom was stuck running errands in the line at Walmart, and we were able to pick him up and take him to the house and meet her there. And you can't do that when you're 3 miles from your school and you don't know anybody else in your neighborhood.
Right. And I keep thinking about all these examples, these beautiful examples that you're giving of the impact of community and schools together. And I think about when you were able to watch over another parent's child, how that creates a relationship between you and your neighbor in the community as well. It creates the fabric that keeps our communities together. And to just think about all these little things that, when they add up, create an enormous impact on the quality of life, on the educational opportunities for these children in terms of how they'll perform, how stable the environment. As you mentioned, one of the key elements of a child's education, big determining factor, is the number of transitions that they have to experience, right? And so we oftentimes see that when it goes elementary to junior high to high school, whenever kids are having to make those transitions from places of certainty, things that they are familiar with and that they know, right, that does create disruption. When they're suddenly exposed to a very large number of additional children that they don't have any kind of social interactions with in the past, that creates social confusion and sometimes hostility, and that's where bullying develops, right? We see so many of the negative effects when it comes to disruption of the communities. You're talking about so many of the positive effects of having communities in schools. And these are the things that, when you look at just a single year operating budget where you have 4 kids too little, those are the things that you miss when you're trying to fully take into account the cost and the benefit of school closure, school consolidation, reducing the footprint, if you want to, that's the LISD's term for it. And it makes me think about a story that I heard about Dunbar High School in East Lubbock, and how it was an academic and athletic powerhouse, that there was a street next to it that folks would call Ivy League Row, because all the teachers who worked at Dunbar lived in the neighborhood, and they cared about the neighborhood. They cared about the kids in the neighborhood. It was called Ivy League Row because their kids all went to Ivy League schools ultimately. But you had this incredible fabric that allowed for, even though this was a period where segregation existed, a school that was able to economically and educationally empower generation after generation. And it was when LISD actually cut that neighborhood in half and forced half of the neighborhood to actually, and some of these kids could see Dunbar High School from their house and were having to go to Estacado High School instead, where we saw ultimately the decline, not just of the school itself, but the neighborhood, Dunbar Manhattan Heights, and the lack of families, the decline in property tax values. We have seen this so many times in the city of Lubbock. And it just sort of asks the question, why do we keep doing this strategy when we know what it does?
Those who don't learn from the pastor bound to repeat it. And when you're talking about an education system that should learn from its past mistakes, it's even more disheartening. We've seen it. We've seen it time and time again at the high school level. Now imagine this is the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years of your education. Right. How are you supposed to rebound from that? And a lot of the kids that are in that program have already experienced trauma. A lot of these kids they've moved a couple times, 3, 4 times, and their families found their niche. They found this place, this neighborhood where they could afford the rent. They had a good, safe school. They had an after-school program that could take care of them. All the families lived in the same neighborhood, and we watch over each other. There's 3 of my daughter's kindergarten classmates that live on our street, let alone, we see each other. We could go meet up at the park, and this, I spoke to one of the other parents in our neighborhood, and she was speaking about how she has, I want to say like 12 grandchildren that have, 20, that 12 have gone to Dupre. And now she's starting with her great grandchildren going to Dupre. And that's all going to be disrupted. She's looking at 20 something great grandkids that she wanted to go to Dupre. And I've also spoken with people who had a historic connection to Dupre, or who had lived in the neighborhood, moved out of the neighborhood, and still transferred back in. They want to be at this school. I mean, what does that say to you if they're transferring back in from Cooper? They're transferring back in from Friendship. They're transferring back in from other schools like Roosevelt ISD. They want to be at Dupre because there's something magical about that small, safe community where everybody knows who you are. And that holds you to some set of accountability as well as a student there. If you know that your auntie down the street is going to see you acting up at school, you are not going to act the same way. If they know that there's somebody looking out after them, or there's somebody at that school that cares, they're going to care too. I know the principal, Miss Talbert, is an amazing principal, and I've been really blessed to work with her for the last few years that my daughter's been there. And she knows each and every one of those children. She knows each and every one of their stories and their family trees. And she wants, I know that she cares for these kids, and having somewhere that you can walk to, that if you needed help, you could go, and there might be somebody there working late, or if they could go across the street to Shalom, the Hope Shalom, Hope Community Church, knowing that there's people there that they know, whose face they recognize, or maybe they know somebody down the block because their kid is in your class, or you've seen them, then you feel safe. You know that you can be protected. And that's what children need. They don't need some softball program for 3rd graders, or some crazy art program. They don't, when you have so few students, you can have the part-time music teacher and the part-time art teacher, and it works because you have such a value in the rest of the education that you have just a better opportunity because you have a strong foundation. And I don't want my daughter's education or her classmates, because I care about those kids, I don't want them robbed of that opportunity.
Oh, and I'd like to ask you a little bit about the teachers, because they're in a difficult position. I know, and I've heard that a lot of them would love to be able to advocate, be able to be very vocal on these issues, but for them, there's a tension because of who their employer is. And I'm curious, because they can't speak for themselves on this issue, what has been the general sentiment from teachers you've talked to and engaged with, and other parents who have talked to the teachers? How have they been feeling about this?
Well, they're heartbroken. A lot of them have poured years into this school, and to these children, and they were looking forward to making this school better. I'm personal friends with a few of the teachers that either have worked or currently work there, and they are all heartbroken. They just really, really are. They don't want the school to close. And I was there on last Friday for a reading program for my daughter's school. And the children were just talking, and they were like, what school are you going? Which one are you going to go to?
Oh,
And they were asking their teachers what school they were going to because they want to stay with their teachers. 7-year-olds should not have to worry about that. And I'm sorry.
no, I have tears in my eyes too. This hurts. Yeah.
A 7-year-old shouldn't have to worry she's going to lose her friends because her school is closing down. She shouldn't have to worry about that.
Yeah, these are the things that I think get lost on the school board level if those folks aren't careful. You're not close to the communities like this as much as maybe you once were, right?
Right.
Part of me thinks that makes it a little easier for them to make these sort of decisions, being so separated from it.
And I think also a lot of these people, even if they do have children in LISD, they're not in the financial or societal position that these families are.
Right.
They don't understand. They don't understand the way these families have to live, and that they have to worry about so many things on a daily basis. The one thing they didn't have to worry about was a safe education for their child.
Yeah.
They knew that they were going to go to Dupre. Had been there 95 years. It was going to be there for them and their generations after. When you live hand to mouth or you live paycheck to paycheck, you think differently. Your brain is wired differently.
Yeah.
And these people that are making decisions for the families that they don't understand their lifestyle.
Yeah. And this is something we've seen. Yeah, we've seen this time and again. This is actually something that I've actually also stated to the city council because I have lived that life and I know what it's all about. And I know that the decisions I was making at that time, you're exactly right, were completely different than the decisions that I am blessed to make today. And I try to never forget that because of this kind of thing right here. And I think that it would be a good exercise for leadership to commune with the community more so that they are closer to these stories and so that they can, try to understand this. And so for everybody out there listening, I just want you to think about this conversation we just had, think about all of your feelings and speak those if you're able to. Speak those at this meeting that's coming up on Monday. We are working to get as many media there as we can. We know there will be some media. So Lubbock Compact was created. Again, another reason that we were created was because of the fact that we ourselves were frustrated with not being heard. And so we created this organization so folks can be heard. And so I encourage you to bring your stories because we will get those out there and we will have media outlets out there that will get those out there. And if you're comfortable talking to a reporter, we have some that will be able to take your thoughts and your feelings on this. And we are going to be lending our support full stop in whatever way we can for this community. So we're here with you and we're going to be with you through this process. And I was telling Leah this other day, I'm so glad that you guys organized so quickly because that's what is giving us just a shot here.
Exactly. It's y'all, the energy, that desire, that drive.
Yeah. And we've already changed a step in the normal process. Yep. We don't normally get a surprise meeting. We don't normally get that. And so this is a big deal. And so that should be seen as a win. And we just have to capitalize on this now. And we have to just be firm and, speak your truth and ask those questions that you have. I have questions, but I'm not in the community. If you guys in the community will have questions that I'll never think of. And it's important for somebody to ask those questions and to hear the responses. And then at the end of the day, 3 of these trustee seats are coming up in this next election. There are other, right. There are other avenues to, pursue change. And so I would say, let this not be, however it turns out, let this not be a one-off instance.
Yeah.
Let's use this as a starting point to start turning this around, because the message we got to be firm about is no more school closures. And I've got some folks who want to pull my ear, and that's fine. I will hear them out. But my stance is firm on this, and Lubbock Compact stance is firm on this. And, unless somebody can bring out some extraordinary evidence.
I'd love data that shows that, property values went up when the schools closed, that family enrollment increased when the schools closed, that test scores increased for the students who were impacted by the. I'd love to see all that data. I welcome to see all of that data. I think it'd make everybody feel a lot better about the trauma that is about to be experienced in the community. But the challenge that I would say is we have yet to see that data for any of the school closures that have happened. And some of these happened 15, 16 some odd years ago. We've had plenty of time.
You can go back further, because Roger Settler, who is from the Overton area,
yes, Overton,
was speaking about how their school closed in the 80s, folks. And I grew up during a time where we saw that area. It used to be referred to, folks who don't know, it used to right across the street from Tech. It used to be referred to as Tech Ghetto. Yeah. And the reason why it became Tech Ghetto is for that reason. And
it lost its school.
It would be great if we could have Roger on here just to say that one story that he told at the Heart of Lubbock Neighborhood Association. But yeah, we can go back as far as you want to go back. This does not work out. And so we've got to be firm, but we've also got to be diligent, and we cannot give up, again, regardless of what the outcome is here, because if we're not able to save this school, it's going to be another school. And if we're not able to save that school, it's going to be another and another, until we start to reverse this course. And so I just encourage everybody to stick this out. We are going to try to win this, and we're going to try everything we can to save this school. And I just encourage everybody to join us. The last thing I'll leave off with is something that we talk about on here quite often. If you can, start to attend your neighborhood association meetings. There is a neighborhood association in Heart of Lubbock. And so these are the areas, or these are the places where these things can be discussed, where you can organize, where you can collaborate, and get a little more manpower behind the things that you're doing. And not just with schools, but with all sorts of things around the neighborhood. And so just encourage everybody to get involved with your neighborhood associations. I encourage everybody to come out to this meeting on Monday, the 1st. It's going to be at 5:30 p.m. at Dupre Elementary. You do not have to be from the neighborhood to come to this meeting. You do not have to be from the neighborhood to speak your mind on this. You do not have to be from the neighborhood to show support for the Dupre community. And so everybody should come out. We've got some organizations. I know that LULAC has told us they'll be there. I'm sure some of the NAACP will be there. We will be there, Lubbock Compact. We're trying to get as many folks in there as we can. A lot of folks caring about this. And then, of course, go on Facebook and join the Save Dupre. Yep. What's the name of the official name of the group?
Save Dupre Elementary 2021.
Okay, yeah. So go join that group. Again, you don't have to be from the neighborhood to join the group. Just join it. And if you'd like to give out a hand, give a hand with the situation in any way that you can, that's a good place to stay up on everything. We did put the emails to all of the trustees for LISD. I put the post that Leah had made in the group. It's in the comments of this video. So if you're watching this afterwards, you can go to the comments of this video, and I have that link in there posted. And that's another thing that we can do in the meantime is email your trustees. And then the next process then, or the next part of the process that will be after this meeting on the 1st is a meeting on the 11th. So just so everybody kind of knows what's going on with the meeting on the 11th, it is to do with redistricting in this area. And so more than likely what they're trying to do is go ahead and redistrict this to be a vocational building versus an elementary school. And then in the next meeting, they would vote to then close the school.
Wow.
So, you know, that's kind of the setup for the meeting. But again, you can just come and talk about how this school does not need to be closed. It does not need to be redistricted as something else. It needs to stay in elementary school. And so that meeting, unfortunately, is probably going to happen at like 7 a.m. on the 11th. But we will keep you posted once we have the official time. I don't think that that's officially released yet, but we've got some time on this, but we don't have much time. And so we've got to stay on it. We've got to stay diligent. Leah, thank you so much to you, the other families and everybody that has supported this. I've had teachers reach out to me, and it breaks my heart that they feel like they can't stand up for their school because they're going to get in trouble. But just God bless you all for doing this. And we will be here helping you. And I hope that everybody out there watching will lend their support to this. And great show. Lot of great things discussed here. Not a great topic, but this is a lot of good information. And thank you, Leah.
No problem.
And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And we will be right back here next time. Good night, everybody.